Okay, I think we are ready to go. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar, Navigating the Current Immigration Landscape for U.S. International Students. So good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much once again to our presenters slash panelists, Dobrina and John, for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come to be with us and share their expertise and knowledge on this issue that we as the immigrant community, especially international students, have been struggling with for a while. So today's webinar is being presented by Career Pulse, a mentorship and skills development organization that focuses on trying to support the immigrant international student community in navigating their careers in the US. So before we get started, just I'd like to cover a few housekeeping topics. So today's webinar is being recorded, so we'll be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with your colleagues. And if you have questions after the fact, you can always reach back out to us, Career Pals, or the individual panelists, because we will share their information as well during and after the presentation. We also invite live comments and questions. Please go to the chat box. You can locate it right now as we are starting. Look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think you have a question or if you think of a comment during the presentation, you can just type it in there and hold it for the discussion portion of the end of the event. So today's presenters are Dobrina Justin, like I mentioned earlier, and John Kosravi. And just a quick introduction of the organization, because I'm sure for most of you, this could be your first time hearing about Career Pals Mentorship and Skills Development Organization. So this organization was formed in March 2019 by myself and my partner, Munya Choga. So how this came about is we both moved to the US from Zimbabwe to study and grow our careers, like many international students who are joining us today. And like many of you, we struggled to settle in, the culture shock, a new academic system, and how to navigate the internship and, the job search process in light of so many immigration restrictions on student employment. These were just some of the few challenges we had to endure in our individual journeys, but thankfully, with the support of mentors, professors, advisors, friends, and really well-wishers who were even strangers who spoke life into our situations, and some few mistakes here and there, we eventually found our footing. We're not there yet, but we are still going. But I would like to say we are over the hurdle that I believe most international students are going through right now. So we managed to secure internships, volunteer opportunities, and jobs that we are in at the moment. So recognizing these struggles, we formed this organization and trying to really empower and support culturally diverse students and becoming valuable contributors to their communities and our global community. So not just plugging into the US economy, but also how you can also help your peers, your colleagues, and some your parents back home. Our values as an organization are to pursue knowledge, empower others, and the most important one is to serve our community, which is what we try to do as Career Pals, is to complement the career development academic training to give students actionable guidance on career growth. We know and understand that many schools do have career development services. They have the IOS or International Students Offices that try to the best of their ability to support international students on things like OPT, CPT, how to search for jobs, internships. But what we faced as students was that a lot of times this was not tailored to our needs because we had the extra hurdle of wanting to understand how to navigate the job search when you need sponsorship. So what we're trying to do as Career Pulse is to complement those career development trainings that they give at schools by offering one-on-one mentorship, offering opportunities for skills development in different companies. And like I mentioned earlier, we're just starting out and we've been able to launch our first mentorship group, and we're getting into the second cohort in this fall. And the other thing we offer as well is free webinars like this one. This is actually our first. So thank you so much for everyone who joined, just to make sure that we give people information that they need without them necessarily having to pay for it. So without getting spending too much time, we'll just get into it. So for today, our focus is on trying to understand the current immigration landscape. There's been so much happening if you've been following the news, not just about COVID, but general immigration laws have been changing almost on a daily basis, and it's hard to keep up for the layman like myself. So today we brought to you professionals or experts in this field, so immigration lawyers. We're going to talk about CPT, RPT, H1B, the differences, the application deadlines, things you need to look out for, common reasons for application rejections, how to overcome them, and your next options if you do get the rejections. And they are also going to offer to us some immigration law resources that we might need in the future. Believe me, I didn't know that I was able to get a lawyer as a student when I needed one, not just because maybe you committed a crime, but maybe just because you needed immigration advice. So I hope today you will find that information useful. So our first presenter and panelist is Dobrina Houston. She's the founder and managing partner of Houston Law Group, PLLC, a full-service immigration law firm. So Dobrina represents multinational companies, tech startups, individual entrepreneurs, and other entities before the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service Department of Labor, U.S. embassies, and consulates. As a former immigration attorney for Infosys Limited, Dobrina has direct experience with creating and supervising immigration programs and processes for multinational companies with significant overseas operations. In addition to that, Dobrina also advises clients on strategies to overcome immigration denials and appealing cases in federal court. So this is how we actually got to know Dobrina, is we were trying to figure out questions from some of the students that we've been mentoring, and she has really been helpful with that. So at this time, I'm going to hand over the floor to Dobrina, who is going to start today's presentation. So Dobrina, thank you once again for accepting our invite to come and talk, and it's all yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me today.
You're welcome.
Okay, so since I have only 15 minutes to cover all immigration, I'll just jump right in. So I'll make sure to cover all of my PowerPoints. We're gonna start with post COVID-19 projections. This is worse than probably having a crystal ball. No one really knows what's gonna happen, but we don't know when we're gonna go back to pre-COVID normal. But one thing is obviously things to look for, and that's why we are monitoring things every day. Is obviously as right now consulates are starting to maybe reopen some of them, providing limited services to immigrants. And also the other big item for this year is the November election. So depending on how things go, maybe some of the regulations, the laws, the new proposals will change come January or after January. Obviously it's not going to happen right away. And just current immigration landscape, this is not in the PowerPoint, but just yesterday, and actually I haven't even read it the whole thing. So the DHS has a new proposed change, and I have it here for F, J, and I non-immigrants, I journalist visas. Basically, what they're trying to do is to put a limit on student visas for how many years you can get your student visa. So they want to put a limit to 4 years. But if you are from the African continent, so most of the countries from the African continent and a few others like Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, and so forth, they want to do only 2 years visas, even though your program might be 4, but then you have to reapply for your to continue your program. So this came out yesterday. I saw it yesterday evening. So just FYI, I just posted on my LinkedIn as well. So this is how fast things are changing. There's nothing good about this new proposal, but hopefully hopefully it doesn't go through. So that's, you know, one thing I wanted to add. If you want the list of the countries, just pin me offline and I'll send it. Okay, next. Okay, so for during college and universities, what do you need to know? So we have F1 students; those are the full-time studies. You cannot work outside campus unless you have work authorization, and work is limited to 20 hours during the school year on campus, 40 hours during summer on campus. The next one is the J1 visiting scholar, slightly different than F1. You work as a visitor scholar at the university. You might take classes depending on your program. Some fellowships require or allow to take classes. And for some scholars, the J1 visa comes with a 2-year home residency requiring, meaning once you finish the J1, you're required to go back to your home country for 2 calendar years. And you can, there is a waiver to waive the 2 years, but that's a different topic. So what happened with during COVID, with COVID restrictions and freshmen outside the United States? So basically, ICE issue guidance saying that the DSO should not issue any I-20s for students in new or initial study. So basically, if you're a new student and trying to come for your fall semester here, you won't be able to come this year. If you were enrolled in courses in the United States on March 9, 2020, that's when that guidance actually came out, but you left the United States because your school either closed or, you know, they encourage you to leave and take classes online, you will be able to come back and continue your studies. Now, some of the colleges came up with hybrid programs, online and in person, where existing students are eligible to enter the United States, does not apply to new students. So those are some of the restrictions due to COVID. Okay, next. What happens after graduation? So we have a few options in terms of employment. F1 OPT, CPT, and STEM OPT, H1B, and then the J1. It's a little bit different. Some you know, some people, depending on country of origin, you know, what is the, you know, the level at your J1, you might be able to actually apply for a green card. But again, that's another topic. Okay, next. So rights and options. Yeah, often, you know, students will ask me, well, what are my rights? Like, you know, I'm like, you know, your rights as an international student, unfortunately, you know, are somewhat limited. So I usually tell people, you have to, the first thing to do is familiarize yourself with your school's International Student Center and with some of their representatives. I encounter students when I ask them, well, you know, have you talked to your school? And then they never heard of the International Student Center at all. So that's a bad start. The reason I'm saying that, you know, you have to get familiar is because, you know, schools have different processes and procedures. Just because something is allowed by the USCIS doesn't mean that the school will actually follow that guidance. Some schools are more conservative than others, so you have to follow. You know, you have to know your International Student Office, the GSOs, and that's your first stop. I know that, you know, sometimes they might not be super helpful in the sense that they cannot provide you advanced information or something outside their their job description, but you have to start from there because they're the ones that are in charge of your CPT and OPT and so forth. Anytime you have questions, that's why they're there. Instead of asking your friend or friend of a friend, or go online and do all these Google and forums that where people tell you 100 people will tell you 1,000 different things. Go to your school first. Also, a great option is to consult with an immigration attorney. We are out there. That's you have the right to an attorney. You can hire one. You can inquire. You can ask your school. Sometimes schools have a roster with attorneys that they work with, or they refer students to, and they can give you names, and you can call or email. And actually, my biggest tip is just be informed. Just stay on top of your immigration status, be informed, and know what's going on. Okay, CPT. What are it stands for Curricular Practical Training. F1, you have to be on a F1 student. At least 2 semesters for undergrad students in order to get the CPT, or graduate students can start during the first semester. The CPT, it must be integral to your major and must be part of your program. In other words, it has to be part of it has to be part of your program. It has to be work experience required before you graduate, or in other words, work experience that you won't be able to graduate without. That will be written in the course program, so that's something the school will help you with. And the school actually signs off on your CPT. You don't apply to USCIS for any work authorization. It could be full-time or part-time. If you're full-time for 12 months or more, then you won't be eligible for OPT later. Okay. OPT, it's 1 year of study, and after graduation, you can get the OPT. Work must be related to your major. So this wasn't a problem back in the day, but now in the last few years, USCIS actually started asking for proof that your work during your OPT months was related to your major. So when I was international student, like many years ago, nobody cared. Nobody really I mean, they were telling us, it has to be related to your major, but that was never a, question from USCIS. It applied at each education level. So Bachelor of Science, you do OPT, then you go to Master's, you do OPT, and then PhD and so forth. Okay. It's 12 months. You can do your application 90 days before or 60 days after the expected program completion date. Once your OPT I-20 is issued, you have 30 days to apply. Again, it's very obvious, but people don't do it. A lot of schools, if not most of the schools, they have workshops. So for OPT and CPT, where you go and they tell you exactly what you need to do, exactly how to fill out your application, when to mail it, where to mail it. I remember myself, I was going to these every time they had one. I would just show up and just gather information. Don't do it on your own. Don't do it with your friend because they got it. Go with the school. And once the OPT is issued or approved, you have 90 days to find or start a job. So that's the limit that they have. If you don't, then basically you have to leave the country unless you continue with your studies. Okay, next. And then we come to H1B Cap-exempt. So H1B, it's an employer-sponsored work visa. You have to have an employer. The position must require bachelor degree, and your employer must file or register your application with the USCIS between March 1st and March 20th. And I put the 2021 because that's the next registration. Once they register you, if USCIS receives more petitions, then they have available, they will do a lottery. And then once you find out that you won the lottery, then your employer can put in the actual application, and hopefully the application gets approved by October 1st. Your start date on that H1B is October 1st with the government's fiscal year. Another H1B topic that is not very common, or I shouldn't say common, it's something that some people are not familiar with, is the H1B Cap-exempt. What does that mean? So basically, you can file, your employer can file H1B throughout the year. So we don't have a cap, we don't have the strict deadlines. It has to be, in order for that to work, obviously it has to be a cap-exempt institution or organization. What are the cap-exempt institutions? That would be your universities. That would be a research organization, or a government organization, or a research organization that works with a university. For example, a university has hired or has given money or grant to an organization to do research on their behalf, then you can do a H1B Cap-exempt petition. Now, one thing though, if you, let's say you get a H1B Cap-exempt, you work there for 2 years, and then I don't know, Apple comes around and says, come work for us, we'll transfer your H1B. Well, you have to go through the cap at that point, through the lottery. Okay, next. Common mistakes to avoid as a student, as I said, avoid advice from friends of friends, and so forth, because that's how a lot of people get in trouble. Make sure you keep up with the deadlines for the OPT applications. Attend those workshops at your university. Another thing to avoid is obviously to work without authorization. One common problem, an issue that I see over and over, is with international students and startups. So international students, some of them would like to form a company and do their startup and so forth. Well, you can do that only if you have your OPT. You cannot work on your own startup without having an OPT. Another issue that I have inquired a few times, not too often, is the cannabis industry. So sometimes companies that are in the cannabis industry will try to hire people in their finance departments, IT, whatever. Stay away from these, because pot, although it's in some states is legal, and there's nothing wrong to work for these companies and organizations, pot is illegal under federal law. So if you're involved in something like that, and then later on, your OPT will most likely get denied, and later on the H1B and so forth. I had a few consultation like that where people work with the cannabis industry, so just FYI. Off-campus jobs. So for off-campus jobs, you must be authorized to work either with your CPT or OPT. OPT must be related to your major. As I said, USCIS asks for this type of evidence. CPT must be part of your study program. Another common question that we get often is, can I volunteer and use my OPT? You can volunteer if the work is related to your major. However, you cannot, and I'm not a labor attorney or employment law attorney, but you cannot volunteer for a for-profit organization, because then they will be breaking all kinds of labor laws. You must check with your school what is exactly allowed in terms of volunteering, because nobody wants to get in trouble with the Department of Labor. If you work without authorization, it must be for academic credit. So technically, you pay for the academic credit, and then you can work for the organization or the institution. That basically, it's like your internship, and when the school will give you credit for it. And CPT, OPT, and H1B resources. As I said, the first one, familiarize yourself with your school's International Student Center. Immigration attorney, if you have, if you have further questions or you need information that the school cannot provide. And here are 3 websites that needs to become your friend. That's the ice.gov service, the state.gov, and uscs.gov. And this is my contact information if you have any questions down the line. So how did I do on time?
You did great. Thank you, Dobrina.
That was fast.
Now you can breathe. Thank you so much, Dobrina, for sharing. That was so insightful. And yeah, this is really timely. Just hearing that there's like new laws coming in is not a surprise. So just like Dobrina did mention, we have to make sure that we stay on top of this. It is your visa status, it is your immigration status, so you have to stay informed. We will share all the resources that were shared by Dobrina in the last slide in terms of the sites you have to follow. But yeah, Dobrina, thank you so much. So moving along, I would like to introduce John Khosravi, and he's going to be going over the last part of the presentation before we jump into our questions. So John is the managing attorney of JQK Immigration Law Firm, focusing solely on marriage, green cards, immigrant investors, and applicants with extraordinary abilities. So John has also taught immigration law at Pepperdine and Loyola Law Schools, and was the former president of AILA's Law Student Committee. In addition to law students, John also trains immigration lawyers through the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, and is also the host of the Immigration Lawyers podcast. So that's where I found him. He hosts so many podcasts, including Q&As on YouTube, on Facebook, and various social media platforms that we are going to also share with you so that you can follow him to keep updated on like immigration laws that are ever changing. So he is also the founder of the Migration Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated at educating the public about global migration. And he really has an interesting perspective to immigration, and you should definitely look up his foundation. So John, thank you so much for joining us. You can take the ball away.
Sure. Thank you so much for hosting this event. I'm so glad we can reach out to people. I guess one quick note Dobrina mentioned as well is these proposed rules came out yesterday. So potentially everything we're saying could be different in 2 months. So that's for you. But we're going to focus right now on common mistakes people make, problems they have in the case. So you can watch out for those. It's going to go fast. So it's just, my goal is for you to hear it. And if you feel like, you have one of these issues, talk with a lawyer in private, talk with your school and get some advice. So be aware that employment for OPT needs to be 20 hours a week minimum. It doesn't have to be full-time, but there's a minimum for it. And if you're going to do unpaid internships, you got to be careful. There was a court case a few years back that said interns still have to get paid unless maybe they're getting student credits for it. So you got to walk that line and make sure it's done properly. Now, a big issue that's popping up is the delays with USCIS. And these bullets I'm doing right now, you'll see that I keep jumping around from different things. So sorry, a lot of different ideas popping up. But there's huge delays with USCIS, the agency of the government that processes these. The hope usually was, the work permit, the I-765 is the form to get a work permit. Hopefully that would cause a work permit to be approved in 45 or 60 days. It's going longer now. So be prepared for that. And the government ran out of money to actually print the work permit card many times. So you'll get a paper notice in the mail that you're approved, but you may not get the work permit. For now, they've said that paper notice is enough to act as proof of being able to work for OPT, just in general with people who get work permits. Now, there's a thing called CPT. You all know CPT. Dobrina talked about that. There's a concept called first day CPT, which is you could immediately start working when you start a school because part of your curriculum requires you to get real life experience. Now, many times, you know, I don't have a percentage, but schools that offer first day CPT is kind of a scam. It's a way to get around work permit requirements, and the government is really on top of this. So if you go to a school and they're just pushing that you can get a work permit first, and the focus is not really on the education, be mindful of that. Be careful of that. Just be careful what school you're dealing with. If the school says, don't worry, you don't have to come to class and you could just, you know, get the work permit and hang out here like it's a tourist visa and have fun. The government is cracking down on these programs, and you could be accused of lying or fraud or misrepresentation for signing up these schools. So make sure it's a legitimate school that you're attending and the program is legitimate. Now, with regards to getting OPT, you don't need to have the job lined up beforehand when you're applying for the work permit for it. So just remember, you file, the best thing to do is, well, let's back it up. So you could file for OPT about 90 days before graduation. You really want to file the paperwork on the 89th day, like immediately. So if there's delays, you know, there's less delays into the work experience after you graduate. As well as if there's problems, you have time to fix it, because you have 90 days before graduating and up to 60 days after graduating to file the paperwork. If there's issues, you want to know as soon as possible so you can resubmit it. And one of the main issues people have is when you submit Form I-765, the work permit paperwork, you also need to get a new I-20 and submit that with it. And the government needs to receive that new I-20 within 30 days of the issuance of the Form I-20. And so hopefully all students know about the I-20. If it's instead of 30 days, it's 31 days, USCIS will deny the work permit request saying your I-20 is too old. And I have that happen frequently. So I see it all the time when people come and they filed the I-20 on the 31st day is when the government got it, and all of a sudden they reject them. And at that point, they're past the 90 days and the 60 days after graduating, and they're completely out of status. So one is you want to file early to catch this issue. And secondly, you just got to make sure the paperwork's right. You know, the Form I-765 is completed properly. The government is finding excuses to deny every case right now. They'll say you left one box empty, or this part is illegible. You submitted something that's not important. You didn't submit something that's not really that important. But they're just trying to find excuses to deny cases. It's a very stressful thing to deal with. I mean, every day, Doreen and I are dealing with this nonsense that's getting worse and worse with the immigration system. So you got to be careful of that. If we go to the next screen. Thank you. So as Doreen mentioned, OPT has to be in the field of study is something they're cracking down on. Just with regards to CPT, if you've been doing CPT, that's when you're working during school for a full year at full time, that's going to decrease from the OPT time or take away your ability to do OPTs. Now, next thing I want to mention is it's really important. It really applies to anyone coming to the United States with a visa. A visa that's issued by a U.S. embassy or consulate abroad is permission to come to the United States and knock at the door and say, can I come in? So if you get a visa that's valid for 10 years, that gives you 10 years of time where you can just come and knock at the door, but you can't enter. The Border Protection Officers, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the customs officers you see at the airport or at the land ports if you're driving in, or at seaports if you're coming by boat, which I doubt anyone here is doing that, but they give you permission to enter. And once you enter, they issue what's called an I-94. And you can find this I-94 if you just type in I-94 on Google, go to the CB website, and put your passport information there. And it'll list who you are, when you enter the United States, what status you had when you entered, and how much time you have here. Every time you enter the United States, you have to check that I-94. No one does it, but I just had an F1 student case who entered on a student visa. And for some reason, the officers put him as he entered on what's called advanced parole. And that's a whole different topic, too complicated to talk about here. But it was like, it's a ridiculous thing. It's like saying you're Santa Claus. It's like so ridiculous. Well, he was transferring schools, and a new school caught this and said, well, you enter on advanced parole. Your advanced parole expired 6 months ago. You're out of status. And he was freaking out. So we were able to fix this up because, you know, CBP realized it was such a ridiculous mistake, but they don't always fix it up. So you always want to check and correct this stuff beforehand because these errors do happen. Don't rely on the stamp they put in your passport. That's not the official time. You need to check your online I-94 each time. And speaking about online, you should always check your CVIS. You know, nowadays students could access their own records too. Check to make sure your address is correct. If you change employers, you have to update them. You have to update your address. You never want to have outdated information because that could be a reason for them to take away your student visa status. and create a lot of problems for you. So I always want to update them and the school's international department with whatever you do. And before you do anything, go and talk to them. Now, international departments are made differently. There's some excellent ones in some schools, and there's some awful ones I've seen in some schools. So you really need to do your own homework, talk with them, and be your own advocate. You know, even though if you hire a lawyer, you always should defend yourself, because only you could defend yourself to the best of your ability, and you know the facts of your life and stuff. You really don't want to leave this a chance. Don't put it off for later. A lot of students do that. This is really important. That they've made this process very complicated, and frankly, you spend too much money to go to these schools to just let it not pay attention to it. So definitely keep an eye on that. We'll go to the next screen. So I-765, that's the application for a work permit. Make sure you have the proper category which you're using as a student visa holder. The different types are listed there. Make sure that you sign it with a pen, ink. I had another case recently contact me. The guy used a digital signature. USCIS, the immigration department, does not accept digital signatures. It has to be a pen that you wrote and signed it. Now you could copy a photocopy of that and send it to the government or like that, but the paper itself has to be signed by a wet ink pen, or else they're not going to accept it. And then you need to check USCIS.gov, the website for it, to see the most up-to-date form. The government frequently updates the form, and there's no difference. The form is exactly the same, but it just says a new version of it. And if you don't send the newest version, which just the situation happened last month or a couple weeks ago, well, on a day they change it. If you don't send the right one in, they're going to deny it. And you ought to check the instructions, because they'll change stuff without telling us. Change the address, check the address, check out the fees for it. They'll change the stuff without telling us. It's very almost sinister and really bad faith the way they act about it under this administration. Before, they would give us announcements like 9 days beforehand to say, it's changing, reminder, it's changing. Now they'll change it without telling us. And so it's just really wicked, but be careful of this stuff. Another thing is always make sure your address is current with USCIS. You have to, and ICE, always change it. If you have any names or aliases used, and this is a problem I see with a lot of foreign students who apply for their F1 visa, there's a question on your DS-160, the application, that asks, have you used any other names? And in many foreign countries, they have like an American-sounding name. You have to list all these names. It could be considered fraud or misrepresentation if you don't do that. And also on the I-765 form, they also ask if you use any other names. You got to consistently tell the government everything. You don't want them to come back later and say, well, we found this document that says your name is Mary, but your name is Xiao, or it's like a Chinese name. And so you don't want this kind of inconsistency to be here. Now, there's a J1 issue. Actually, I skipped H1B employer petition. If you're doing it, if your employer is going to file for an H1B, this is not I-765. I kind of put it in the wrong place, but the employer is supposed to pay for it, not you. And you can't have a relationship that's behind the scenes. You're paying for it. You're paying the employer back. This is a document. This is a petition by the employer. They don't want you to pay for it. And with regard to J1 visas, Dorina talked about this. Be careful of the 2-year requirement. It's check your visa, check your DS 2019, and check all the paperwork you have to see if it states that you have the 2-year requirement, because if you have that, it's a major issue. Now, some people do get married on a student visa. It's possible to apply for the green card. You should really consult an immigration attorney about that. I have a guide that's called the Ultimate Marriage Green Card Guide. If you go to www.marriageimmigrationlaw.com and make sure to include the www, there's a 40-page guide I have that talks about it. But depending on whether you're marrying a U.S. citizen or if you're marrying a green card holder, there's different rules that apply. And if you have violations or not, or if you entered properly or not, there's a lot of stuff that has to be checked. And that ebook talks about it, but you should schedule a consultation with a lawyer. And you could also have the potential of getting employment-based green cards. The EB-1 is for extraordinary ability, or potentially if you're going to be a professor or you've worked. It gets really complicated. Those are the main ones. EB-2, EB-3 is if your employer is going to apply for your green card. EB-5 is if you're an investor spending a lot of money. And you could do that while you're in school or while you're on OPT, and maybe bypass H1B, just go straight from a student visa to a green card, but it's hard. It's not necessarily typical. So we'll go to the next page, and we only have a few seconds. So unfamiliarity program. So employers don't understand OPT. They want to deal with it. Just let them know there's no cost to OPT other than hiring them, that you're paying them. They may be subject to on-site visits where the government comes and checks stuff out, though it's rare. And if they're doing STEM, which is the extension, so there's basic OPT and there's STEM OPT. So if you're in science, technology, engineering, or math, you could get more OPT time. There's more paperwork that the employer has to do about their work there, and you have to be hired. The employer has to be part of the E-Verify system. There's a lot of things you have to look at. Just one note regarding STEM. Like for example, here in UCLA in Los Angeles, where I am, the university has said certain economics majors can qualify for STEM because there's a lot of math in their econ major. So you typically won't, you know, sometimes you'll think you're not a STEM major. You should talk to your school to see if you potentially you could fall with it, or argue that you're doing science, tech or engineering, math, and you should be able to use the STEM OPT process. So that's something extra to look at and fight for if needed. Next page, please. The employers have to, if you're doing STEM OPT, the employer has to report to the school official if you left at the job or what's going on. They have to keep them updated and not to take a while. Now, most times nobody does this because they don't even know, but those are the rules that are there. And I have a link. I'm not sure if this PDF is going to be a hot link that you could check out, a hyperlink, but there's reporting requirements you can find online for the employer if they want to get more information on this. It's more work, but a lot of times if you're doing STEM OPT, you're probably doing really critical, high-end kind of work, so they want you anyways. All my STEM OPT clients are doing, robotics and like really crazy kind of science that's new, and they're potentially getting paid 6 figures. So the employer doesn't really care. They'll do what they need to do because the caliber of the work they're doing is so urgent, so they'll do that. So they'll deal with the extra requirements that are not typical for like a first-year OPT. We'll go to the next page. Now, for non-STEM OPT, there's less chances of applying for H1B. So you probably get 1 chance of applying for that H1B lottery. If you have STEM OPT, you have more time, so maybe you get 2 or 3 times to apply for the lottery. But the cool thing about regular OPT, not STEM OPT, is you can be self-employed if you start your own company, and the company doesn't need to be e-verified. So I've had it where we have a F1 student launch his own company, does OPT on it for a while, and then once the company's up and running better, we apply for an e-visa, which is an investor type visa. It doesn't lead to a green card, but they can run their own business while that process is going. So it's a cool aspect. You got to be careful how you do it and launch the company. Sometimes USCIS will hassle you saying, oh, you registered a company. It's rare, but they'll bother you sometimes about that. You just got to be very clean about it and plan it out beforehand. The best thing to do is come and talk with a lawyer before you graduate well ahead of time, so you have plans for the next 6 months, year and a half. You don't want to come last second and try to do this stuff because there's a lot of preparation that's needed. There we go next. So let's see, navigating a job search, OPT as a self-employment option, STEM OPT, employer needs to have e-verify, know the timetables, prep beforehand. Be careful on OPT, regular OPT, you can't be unemployed for more than 90 days. You get additional 60 days of unemployment time when you have STEM OPT, but you don't want to be unemployed for more than that. And just note there's all these other visa options, H1B one if you're a Singapore or Chilean national, the E-visas for some countries, L, OP. There's a whole alphabet soup of this stuff you got to get into. And always confirm with your school, if what's going on with OPT and check on it. That example of economics is there. Some acting students could be restaurant hosts because it falls within their acting training and stuff like that. So you got to talk with them to see what kind of unexpected opportunities exist. And these are some resources, have the regulations you can read through. Department of Homeland Security has study in the states.dhs.gov, which talks about this. ICE has its own CVIS place that breaks this stuff down. And sometimes you ask questions from lawyers on a website called avo.com. You can't rely on 100% because they're just writing some stuff, but that's one resource for free that you can look into before, talking with the immigration attorney, schedule a consultation. Some immigration lawyers have free consultations, some are paid. My office has paid consultations, but I have like a live Q&A on Wednesdays. You could go on YouTube and ask questions too. It's different ways of doing it. You just got to be your own advocate and do the work and get into it. Go ahead. And that's about my contact information. If you go to my website, JQK Law Firm, and just type in John Khosravi, all my social media will come, the YouTube page, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can follow all this stuff. I constantly posting information every day on all of them, videos every day, and so hopefully help you all out. And I think that's about it. So let's maybe open up to questions.
Yes, thank you so much, John. And I like the part where you said you have to be your own advocate. So please, people, make sure you're your own advocate. No one is going to be following up on you on whether you have applied for that OPT or if your passport is still valid. I've had people who have come to us and their passport maybe has been like expired for like 6 months, but they didn't know about that. Yeah. So thank you so much, John, for that. And we will share all the resources and all the contact information that John and Dobrina shared. So we have several questions that have been submitted by the audience during registration and some on the chat box as well during the presentations. So we will try to go through most of them. I know we are running out of time. So to any one of you, Dobrina and John, one question that came through was, is there any chance for picking more applicants for a further lottery this year? I guess the visa lottery.
Oh, the H1B, the third lottery. I don't think so, but you know, but nothing is impossible. No, but seriously, I mean, after the second one, if they got the enough H1Bs, which they probably did, I don't envision a third lottery at this point. I don't know if John has more intel on that, but
No, I mean, it's probably not. I mean, even the second round was unexpected, but
yeah.
yes, there's no real need to know this
Mhm.
they keep.
Yeah, because technically, I mean, generally speaking, you know, the H1B start date is October 1st. And then with that second lottery that we had, now I think the deadline was what, like November something. So if they do a third lottery, you know, obviously they have to give more time for people to apply and USCIS to adjudicate. So I don't think they will go past January or December, January adjudicating on these cases. So and if they wanted to do a third one, I think they would have told us by now, or just do it, because they know how many petitions they received. So
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, what legal US documents are students allowed to apply for as international students? So ID, social security cards, etc.
Well, you could probably get an ID. Driver's license, I'm not sure. You probably can if you have a valid I-94. When you have your OPT, you could use that work permit you get to apply for these IDs and stuff. But I mean, your passport it serves as a real ID Act, a compliant ID, so you don't necessarily need all that. And yeah, if you have some sort of non-immigrant visa status, you should be able to file for a driver's license in the United States and for the validity of the time you have.
Okay, thank you. At what point do students file taxes when you're employed, CPT, OPT, or H1B?
taxes. I mean, the same deadlines apply for international students as apply to U.S. citizens. So April 15th, tax day, I guess. I'm not a tax expert, but the only thing to know is, as a OPT, STEM OPT, CPT, you don't have to pay the FICA tax. So you know, make sure that your employer knows that. Some don't. So just tell them that, and then they'll further inquire with their accountant. So
they talk to the accountant. Now, one mistake people think is they think they have to be a green card holder or U.S. citizen to file taxes. If you spend enough time in the United States and also you spend enough time, they're subject to U.S. taxes. But there's agreements where you don't pay all the taxes, or they'll give some back, or you don't submit. That's something it's accountant I'll talk about. But essentially, everyone who's on a student visa is subject to U.S. taxes and tax filing requirements, and notifying the U.S. government of foreign accounts too. That's a big thing. Started. It gets really complicated, so talk with an accountant.
All right, thank you for that. And then another one, what happens when in the middle of the OPT, I get married to an American citizen? Can I continue working?
Sure. If you have your OPT, your visa is valid, you're still working. If you're married to a U.S. citizen, if you continue working, even if your OPT expires, they won't hold it against you. I can't recommend you do something without valid authorization, but they don't hold it against you as long as the marriage is valid and this good case gets approved. But you don't want to invalidate your status by doing something incorrectly. But you know, so that's good. Just talk with the lawyer. Make sure there's always little things that go wrong. Like I have a consultation with somebody, and they got a student loan as a foreign student. Now they got it through a federal loan, and federal loan asks, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" Or a green card holder? And if you're not one of those, they won't give you the loan. But he got the loan, so we're trying to get the paperwork to see, did you say you're a U.S. citizen on that loan? Because if he did, then he's going to be kicked out, never allowed in the United States. He's pretty much banned unless very rare conditions. So you really got to be careful about this kind of stuff. It's hard to know all of it. As an immigration lawyer, it takes years to learn all. You know, you're going to get screwed. Sorry.
Yeah, and make sure, the other thing is, I know it's not a question, but make sure that you don't vote in the U.S. elections, because I've seen those as well. You know, people go and vote for whatever reason, and that's basically that's not good.
And along with that, right now, especially, you'll have people on campus. I'm sure not walking on campus, but usually they have papers say, "Hey, register to vote this year." You are not allowed to register to vote, and registration could be a false claim of citizenship too. So don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how these weird things happen, right? The next question is, how do you answer the question, do you need do you need sponsorship when you have OPT during job applications?
No, you don't need a sponsor. When you're applying for the OPT, you don't need to have a job lined up. That's not necessary, but you can't have 90 days more than 90 days of unemployment. So you'll need to find a job. I'm not sure if that's the exact answer.
I think they mean when you apply for jobs, and you know how they ask you, would you need sponsorship in the future? But if you're on OPT and then you apply for a different job, I guess, and then the employment application will ask, you know, are you going to need sponsorship and visa sponsorship in the future? I think that's what they're asking.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, they do ask. You're right.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I would say yes, because the OPT is limited. It's only for 12 months or, you know, 18 months if you're on the STEM. So I usually, yeah, I would say yes.
Because, you know, it might affect, they're not supposed to, that could be a reason they don't hire you. So some people say no and then bring it up later. It's like, you know, you got to be honest, but, you know, there's some people use strategy on that.
Yeah.
All right, that's like a common question, and I like how you were like, you know, there's a strategy, yes, no, yes.
Don't worry, I say you have to be honest at all times, but if you write whatever you want to write.
Yeah. I know. Okay. And then another OPT question. If I'm on STEM OPT and my 90 days is about to expire before I secure a job, can I work for a nonprofit organization and get paid on a part-time or full-time basis as a contractor?
I don't know exactly. Probably, I'm not sure as a contractor. I don't know the detail. That's something I have to look into. I don't know if they're really know.
I think if you're on STEM, it has to be a full-time position, and they have to fill out the, you know, the training plan and submit that to the school.
Yeah, for STEM is great. For regular OPT, you get away with a lot, but that's something I would talk with the school international part. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. And then, can students who come on Fulbright be eligible for OPT or CPT? I was previously on J1 visa, but now I'm on F1 visa.
You can be on OPT and CPT, but please note that you're almost 99% likely subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement. So let's say you start your OPT because you got a new visa from the embassy and came back in. You could do the OPT, but then once OPT ends, let's say they file for your H1B, you're going to be denied. You can't file for H1B because you have that 2-year requirement. So you got to work on getting rid of it. It's almost impossible to get rid of a Fulbright 2-year requirement. I've heard it happen. I know a lawyer that did it for his wife, but it's a very uphill battle. It's a challenge. So just be mindful of the 2-year requirement. That's an important thing.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a CPT question. Can the CPT be applied off campus as well? Also, is CPT limited to 20 hours per week during the school years? I think you covered this. Any update on this? So CPT off campus.
Yeah, CPT is pretty much off campus almost all the time. Whether it be full-time or part-time, I mean, you have to be able to go to school and take your courses. I can't remember the rules, but it's hard to be full-time CPT and doing school, so that's going to be difficult.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I would love to learn more about the process of getting an H1B. If one is already out of the country, do you make it clear to the employers that you require the visa right at the first HR screening interview? How long is the process of applying for the visa? Is this only due date each year for H1B visa, or can employers who choose to sponsor apply for 1 year round? So I think you also covered this, but I guess the part on when someone is out of the country, is that something that's possible?
It's hard.
Yeah, go ahead, Karina. No, I was just gonna say it is possible, but you have to. It's not easy, obviously. But on that one, I would definitely disclose that I'm not inside the United States, and the employer, basically, that H1B will have to be, consular H1B. Some people, and I had a few clients where they were, they knew the employer from before through internships or whatever. Then they have to go. they had to go back, and now the employer wants to bring them back. So it is possible, but again, it's not every employer will will do it.
And also, there's a travel ban on new H1Bs until at least the end of the year. So that's going to be another thing that's going to hit you, unless the job is exempted in the medical field or you're dealing with COVID or something like that. So when it comes to time, all this kind of stuff, you got to talk with the lawyer, because it's too complicated. It's too complicated.
Okay, thank you. And we left with like 2 minutes, but I'll do a pulse check on Dobrina and John, like how we're doing on time. We still have like a few more questions to go over, so just let me know if you have to like log off. But for those who are still on, we have a few more questions to go over. The next question is also an H1B. Can I offer my employer to pay for my own H1B related costs to increase my chances of being employed?
No, that's legal.
No.
That's a straight answer. Yes. Okay, so and then another one is probably related: how to negotiate H1B sponsorship from my employer, and if I can ask my company to add H1B in the offer letter or the contract.
I mean, just you could ask. It's a negotiation.
Yes.
If they really want you, they'll do it.
Mm-hmm. But one thing to remember is, even if it's in the, let's say you signed the employment offer, the contract, and then they promise that they will sponsor, and then after a few months they decide that they won't sponsor, I mean, that promise for the H1B is not really legally enforceable. Just, you know.
Okay, thank you. And this is quite specific. What do I have? Sorry, why aren't fashion companies sponsoring entry-level jobs anymore? Are there countries where it is easier to get a job or visa sponsorship in fashion that is not the US? I mean, so why? Yeah.
That's an economic question. So it's just the market that they're doing. It's not illegal. Something we could answer.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the next question: I am married to a US citizen and have applied for a green card, which is pending. I want to go to graduate school. How do I do this? Should I apply for an F1 visa while waiting for my case to be approved? With COVID-19, I don't know when I will get an interview. My case has been pending for an interview since October 2019.
You could try doing an I-20 transfer to the new school, but if you're married to a U.S. citizen, even if you violate, as long as the case is good, that's not the review. If you don't just go to that school, probably be okay, but I would need to review the case first. But at that point, you can still probably do an I-20 transfer. You can't get a new visa, but if you already have it here, most likely you could just transfer I-20 to a new school.
Okay, thank you. And then this one is about travel. Can international students be allowed to travel outside of the US without being restricted on visa? If so, how to navigate it?
That's if Dobrina, if you want to go ahead, I keep jumping in. Sorry.
I just tell people now, just don't travel. We just, it's everything is so uncertain that you just never know. The safest is not to travel. Mm-hmm. And the way I understood that question was, did they mean like, going to another country that would potentially require visa for that individual? Was that the question?
So it was just like traveling outside the US and just being allowed to travel to other countries, whether they require visas or not. But I'm sure they will require visas.
If the country requires a visa, then obviously you have to get one. Just because you have OPT, that doesn't substitute the other country's entry requirement. But yeah, generally I tell people, especially on OPT, that just don't travel.
Okay, thank you. Are we allowed to take university classes while on OPT? Can we work towards our masters?
Now, if you work towards your master's, you got to be enrolled in a program. OPT is to study. Maybe you could take like a fun course here and there. I'm not even sure about that. That's something I would talk to the international school department, exactly what the course is, what the goal is, and how much time, all that kind of stuff. Like if you're taking a cooking class, you could do that. But to go towards your master's degree, you need to be a full-time student F1 for that, not OPT.
Okay, thank you. Is there any limit for STEM extension or H1B in terms of salary? Like there should be minimum salary or package to file for H1B?
Yeah, you gotta, there's like an estimated salary range for H1B, not for OPT, but for H1B there is. So it's something that the lawyer has to look into based on the job and the requirements, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one, can you work as an independent contractor on regular OPT?
I can't recall myself. I think you can, but I'm not positive. I can't remember the rules for that.
Yeah, I have seen OPTs on 1099, if that's the question. And then once you get obviously you get on H1B, that 1099, has to be converted to W2. So.
Okay, thank you. So there is the last question that just came in, and it's interesting. What is pre-OPT? Does that affect post-OPT period? I did apply for full-time CPT in summer 2019, but had to cancel. And now I'm working on an unpaid part-time remote internship on part-time CPT. Can I be eligible for part-time full CPT? So I mean, this is this is long. I can probably like send it to you guys, and then we can answer this offline since we are like out of time. I don't know if you want to take a stab at it.
Well, I mean, if you just type in USCIS.gov has a full explanation of it. This is graduate and go with full OPT. But it's that if you use that pre-OPT, it'll take away from your regular OPT time. But there's definitely full breakdowns of this on the government websites that explain it pretty well.
Yeah. So I think for some of the questions that are coming in, we'll save them for you and for Dobrina and John, and then we can always refer people back to you for the questions. But so thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's webinar, especially Dobrina and John. Thank you for sharing your insight and expertise with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you for setting this up and Career Palace for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and good luck to everybody.
So to everyone else, if you have any additional questions or you'd like to connect directly with the Career Pulse team, you can reach out either through email, our website, and our various social media platforms. Make sure that you follow us, you subscribe, so that like we have more webinars coming. Given the immigration landscape is still changing, we'll probably have another update webinar in the foreseeable future, but we have more webinars coming that are relevant to international students, and they are free. Make sure that you share. We will share the slides as well, so you can also share with your colleagues who were not able to join us today. So thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your time, of your weekend, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.